Oh no! It's the fake gamer alarm! Alright, I've played and loved numerous Battletoads games, but I just couldn't beat the original without using the rewind feature in Rare Replay. It was brutally hard. Each level would throw in some new idea, whether it's scaling down a wall, dodging obstacles on turbo bikes, or even platforming around on these giant snakes. It could be cheap and unfair and not every idea stuck, but getting further each time felt like a true milestone. And other Battletoads games like this one for the Mega Drive were genuinely quite excellent all around. But unfortunately, the legacy of Battletoads doesn't get much deeper than that. After an arcade release in 1994, Battletoads went entirely dormant outside of guest appearances in games like Killer Instinct. And that's exactly the premise of the new Battletoads. The Toads have been living a delusional few decades stuck inside a dark void pretending they're world-famous superheroes. But when someone finally finds them, they return to the outside world and no one knows who they are.
So, frogs, how you feeling? Stupid?
We're not frogs. We're toads.
The Battletoads.
We're famous superheroes.
This just in. No, you're not.
It's a completely self-aware story that pokes fun at its legacy and even its budget. And while it's good it can laugh at itself, it doesn't detract from some actual problems it has. The good parts first though. The story was surprisingly a highlight of the game. The energy of the writing and artwork gives off a Saturday morning cartoon vibe, and while some of the jokes try a little hard, there were plenty that gave me some genuine laughs. The whole cast feels properly fleshed out this time, beyond just being the fast one, the big one, and yeah, the sunglasses one.
Don't forget Best Kisser!
It avoids the pitfall of most retro remasters that try and recapture the original far too closely. This feels like a proper sequel. There are new allies, new enemies, almost new everything. The combat's almost entirely different too. The original was somewhat limited by the buttons on an NES controller, but its simplistic approach actually worked really well. You could only do a few combos, but the feedback of punching an enemy felt great, and you could even pick up weapons to really spice things up. And that's something that's missing in the new one. You start with the exact same moves you end with, so that level-to-level combat variety is almost entirely gone. But to its favour, the combat is far deeper than the original could have ever been. Not only can you mix and match combos, but you can also use your tongue like a grapple hook to move enemies around. I always felt like I was in direct control of the arena, and everything around me was just a means to get a higher combo. That number can get very high. And if you're playing on your own, you can switch between any of the three Toads on the fly whenever you want, and they all have different moves. I really appreciated this variety. It genuinely feels like a pretty good system. At first. But unlike the original, this new one fails to mix things up consistently and coherently. Outside of the enemies you fight, there's very little to differentiate any of these levels, and if you're playing on your own, it can get kind of exhausting. There are moments where enemies completely fill the screen and there's always something ready to attack you, and so my routine would be get in a few punches, dodge, get in a few punches, dodge, get in a few punches, dodge, get in a few punches, dodge. It's clearly designed as a 3-player game. In single player, not only does it get tiring, but it can last much longer. You'll simply get through these levels much quicker with more players. Even then, this isn't the same brutally hard game, and in a lot of ways that's for the better. You can no longer hit other players in co-op, and that's a godsend, and the concept of lives is entirely gone. Thank you. In single player, if a Toad dies, they enter a 20-second cooldown, and then they come back. If every Toad dies, that's it, but if the cooldown ends, then they're back in action. Whereas in co-op, you can revive your teammates just by pressing RB next to them. There's a checkpoint before every single encounter too, so you're never set back too far. It's a very generous system, and this generosity does tackle a lot of potential frustration, but that's not what stops the game from being hard. I just didn't have the opportunity to die much. The combat's certainly functional, but it gets to the point where it just doesn't challenge you anymore, and so a lot of my deaths come from the genre-bending levels, but even these were mere blips on an otherwise rather smooth journey. The turbo tunnel returns in a pseudo 3D style, and yeah, this is way more fair and better designed than the original, but it only starts to ramp up just as it ends. The game as a whole has a pretty slow difficulty curve when introducing new mechanics, which is sometimes appreciated, but this is Battletoads. I expect a much brisker pace than this. Though there are some that I really did like. This one felt like a return to DKC's minecart levels, only you match the colour of the button with the colour of the rail. And this Shmup level was awesome. The first time. See, most of these levels are one and done ideas just like the original, but for whatever reason, the third act, of 4 in total, decided it needed 3 of these. By the way, the footage I'm cycling through here, these are different levels. Act 3 really isn't very good. In between these shooter levels, it switches back to a DKC style platformer, complete with the roll jump. There's a lot of DKC love in here. This was awesome at first, but again, there's 3 of these, and they all feel so similar. It's a cool idea, and maybe I could have overlooked how generic it actually feels that they just did it once, but going back and forth through these very similar levels just highlights how simple and bland the level design really is. A lot of these just don't feel like a natural extension of the Battletoads gameplay, and only a few are genuinely fun enough to carry multiple levels, and for whatever reason, the ones that do span multiple levels aren't the best ones. This is a very conflicting game for me, as on one hand it is a lot more fun than playing with a friend, but on the other hand, if you don't have anyone nearby, which I'm sure a lot of us don't right now, that experience is going to be very situational. This is purely a local co-op game. Battletoads doesn't have online, and I can't even excuse the genre for that, because Streets of Rage 4, which came out earlier this year, does have online. I expect far more from a game funded by Xbox. This is not a good look. It absolutely feels designed for multiple players, and my second playthrough was a lot more fun than wrangling in my fiancé, but still a lot of the problems do persist. We'd end up taking a lot of breaks, as even with more players on screen, it can get tiring in long bursts. I don't think the original Battletoads games were generational masterpieces or anything, but there's a reason they're still remembered fondly today, and it goes far beyond the difficulty. They threw a lot of different ideas around, and a lot of them stuck. They also pushed the hardware in ways that this new one doesn't even have the opportunity to replicate. Even with the budget in mind, we never see anything like this. Battletoads on NES was a very dynamic game, and this one isn't. It's certainly not a bad game, and if you're just looking for a couch co-op game to play through Game Pass, then maybe this scratches that itch, though Streets of Rage is also on Game Pass. The story's fun and has a lot of energy, the combat has enough depth to keep itself somewhat interesting, and a lot of elements were improved for the better. You no longer lose if one player dies. Good! But the variety just isn't there, and for every high moment, there's an equally low one. I'm mixed on Battletoads. It's not a very long game, lasting me around 3.5 hours to finish, and I wasn't expecting to run into so much filler in that time. If you're curious as a single player, it's worth a shot through Game Pass, but this really is better as a multiplayer game, and I think expecting it to be something else is where expectations are really gonna fall flat. But even when played multiplayer, there are better beat-em-ups out there, and for playing on your own, there are better Battletoads games. I am happy the franchise is back, but maybe next time it'll be a bit more ambitious. Hopefully there is a next time. There's some good ideas here, it can just be done better. So, what do you all think about Battletoads? Do you think the originals hold up, and is this the revival you wanted? Let us know what you guys think about the art, the gameplay, the direction, the style, and everything about Battletoads in the comments below, and of course be sure to subscribe to Game Explain for a lot more on Battletoads, and other things gaming too. Until next time, bye!